Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, the Crypto Hipster, Jamil Hassan, where I bring you founders, entrepreneurs, co-founders, executives, artists, musicians, thought leaders across the world of crypto and blockchain. And today I have an amazing guest. He is the director at the Haven One Foundation and a portfolio manager at Yield App. His name is Akash Mahendra. Akash, welcome.
Hey, Hamal, great to be here.
Great to have you. And so let's kick things off, and hopefully I pronounced the first name correctly. What is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Well, it's actually quite an unexpected story. So I used to work as a child protection lawyer for the Department of Justice here in Australia before I, started to get into the digital asset space. I think I first got involved in crypto in around early 2017. At the time, I didn't really know what was happening and what to make of all of the all the news and all the hype. But then the Bitcoin hard fork happened, and that's when I was really hooked. I started getting into the tech and learning how everything works. And then there was a bear market during the 2018, 2019 period. That's when I got involved in some Discord communities. I made a lot of great connections and built up my network. And even to this day, I'm still tight with a lot of people I met back then. Then COVID hit. I started working from home more often, and I found myself with plenty of spare time to get involved in DAOs, which was like a big thing back then. I actually got to create my own DAO fund, invest in early stage startups, and it was a great way to kind of get involved and learn about everything which is happening in the space. When it was time to for me to return to the law office, I realized it wasn't really a right fit for me anymore, and I decided to pursue a career in the blockchain space itself. My first gig was working at a decentralized insurance startup based out of Austin, and it was like a really fun, enjoyable experience. I'd never worked at a startup before. I kind of gained a lot of knowledge about risk management and DeFi, how to quantify that risk, the best methods to avoid potential pitfalls in DeFi, and basically managing all the new things which were happening in the space and learning about how everything worked together. So after that, I joined the DeFi portfolio team and the risk team at Yield App. I knew Tim Frost, who's the CEO over there. I kind of knew him beforehand because I was one of the seed investors for Yield App. So we had a relationship there previously. And then internally at Yield App, we kind of built our own risk model. It's a very extensive 135-point variable model that's very much focused on the smart contract side, and takes into account all the historical data, the exposure to DeFi, and the attack vectors and the critical loss factors that that are all involved in this ecosystem, which is innovating all the time. Along the way at Yield App, we did have discussions with a lot of the institutional capital at JP Morgan, BlackRock, Goldman, consistently around the space, because Lucas, our CIO, is previously from UBS, and he has that kind of background. So he put us in contact with them, and they were also at the same time exploring the ecosystem. So pretty much I spent 2 years in the risk team at Yield App, and it kind of made us all realize that there's very unreasonable risk management expectations from all users, not just retail users, but even the current users of DeFi. And they're very hard to kind of quantify and manage risk, as there's hacks and exploits every day. No one really knows exactly on how to manage navigate this space. There's even the veterans have a lot of issues. So that's where essentially the idea of Haven One was born. We recognized that there needs to be a more sensible solution for everyday people and businesses to benefit from the financial opportunities of decentralized technologies. Haven One is basically an EVM-compatible blockchain with guardrails around risk, security, and compliance, and liquidity, on-chain liquidity that gives the best of Web 2 and Web 3 worlds. Yeah, so essentially, to summarize Haven One very quickly, we're building a safeguarded ecosystem with network-level guardrails, approvable identity framework. We kind of have assurances on-chain that all the users' actions are compliant, and they're performed by known actors. So it's a very interesting time for us. We just started building this, and we're at currently we're at a private testnet level, ready to release the public testnet in about a month or so.
Awesome. So, yeah, so I was going to ask you, you answered my question what Haven One is all about, but what does a secure environment, you said the institutions don't find the environment to be secure yet. So what does a secure on-chain environment for finance look like? And then the difference between on-chain finance and decentralized finance?
Sure, that's actually a very fair and good question, Hamel. So Haven 1 is designed using Go Quorum. Go Quorum is an open source blockchain platform that was built by JP Morgan, and it's currently managed by Consensus. We're working very closely with the Consensus team every week to upgrade and improve the client and try and explore the technology that's available to us. Go Quorum actually allows us to manage network permissions, and that's very flexible and expressive in the way we're allowed to kind of play around with those permissions itself. So when I mentioned earlier that Haven 1 has network level guardrails, what that really means is security is kind of baked into the protocol itself. These guardrails exist to protect, not restrict, essentially. So to protect individual financial opportunities on the Haven 1 network. An example of the network level controls we have on chain is controlled deployment contracts. So on a public blockchain like Ethereum, there's no restrictions on what you can deploy, which is great for some people or horrible for most people who lose money on chain. So on Haven 1, what we're doing is any contract that needs to be deployed needs to be whitelisted through and approved by the set of validators, and that's going to have to pass through a governance process. Our plan is like every protocol or contract will have to pass through an extensive risk model that I mentioned earlier. So the risk model we made from the Yield app team comes into play here as well, because every protocol that's deployed on chain will have to make sure that there's an industry standard that has to be met. Each deployment will need to fulfill certain criteria and meet like a certain level of standard to ensure that it's not exploitable. And so that automatically will prevent a lot of issues. Right now, it's of course going to be it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. We're going to how we're building up models on that governance framework, how that's going to work, and what kind of criteria will need to be fulfilled. That's work that's being done right now, and we're going to reveal more and more information as time goes on. Another significant aspect is like the provable identity framework. So everyone on Haven 1, all users, will have to complete an verification process. And those users will have to adhere to KYC and AML standards before executing any on-chain transactions. So only like once they have verified themselves, will they be able to, access the Haven 1 blockchain, transact on-chain, and we'll have constant monitoring of all the users and their addresses. And there's going to be assurances for both retail and institutional people that, there's all actions on chain are compliant, and it's performed by known actors. It's performed by actors who are, they haven't done any malicious activity previously. And, having an on-chain, provable identity framework also allowed us to build this dispute resolution mechanism. So in the event there is some wrongdoing on chain, even if it passes the risk framework model we've built, the contract's been approved by governance process, the protocol, has deployed on chain. Even if there is some wrongdoing, we will have a dispute resolution mechanism, which allows restoration of funds in the event of any wrongdoing or improper conduct. So it's all these things all come together to build on-chain finance. And these protections are, in my view, and are the real difference between DeFi and on-chain finance. We recognize that there is actually a need for a different kind of ecosystem, which is secure, trusted, and compliant to drive the mass adoption. So DeFi is great. Like I'm a big ETH maxi. I love the freedom that DeFi gives me, but to really bring in the new retail, the new institutional players, you need to build something different. And we think Haven 1 is the best way to do it. And, we did make a decision. So we had a lot of discussions internally on how to build this. After like months and months of research, and discussions with a lot of people, we decided that using Go Quorum layer 1 tech was the best way to do it. No layer 2 tech right now is suitable for our specific needs at this time. We can't really have those network level permissions, if you're understanding what I mean, on any layer 2 tech right now.
We're going to talk about layer 2 tech in a little bit. I have that on my list of things to talk about a little bit later. I do want to first lay the land, though, and talk about some of the high level challenges plaguing the DeFi ecosystem, right? That prevent institutional investors from fully committing to the ecosystem participation, right? What are those high level industry challenges, that continue to plague, DeFi? And then I'll have a follow up.
So I come from a risk management background. So in my view, the biggest challenge out there, it's going to be security and smart contract risks. So right now we're about 5 billion deep in exploits over the last 2 years, and that's just smart contract based exploits. So 2021, 2022, Chainalysis provided a report that I think over $5 billion worth of US in funds have been, lost on chain in the past 2 years, which is a huge amount. Like that's mind-boggling to think of when DeFi is so new. We don't really have that much TVL on chain, but and the problem is new innovations and developments are creating new attack vectors that really we can't figure out how to prevent these things really easily. It's difficult to really quantify risks on new developments. So like there's protocols right now like creating future yield derivatives. There's new leverage products every day. There's Eigenlayer, which is like getting a lot of steam right now, which is essentially like creating a middleware, which is built on the ETH network that lets protocol leverage Ethereum's highly secure trusted network without needing to establish its own validator set, right? So these are all new things coming out. We don't know how to quantify this risk because it's all super, super new. It hasn't been battle tested. The reality is like it's going to create new attack vectors and risks that are difficult to comprehend for the current user, let alone the mom and dad, new retail investors come in. Like it's difficult to even like get them to understand how all these things work, let alone try and figure out the risks if they want to deploy their own capital and figure out if it's going to be worthwhile for them. And not just new protocols I'm talking about, Jamal. So battle-tested protocols such as Balancer, which is considered a blue chip protocol. It's been functioning for many years. I love Balancer. I love using those pools, managing my own risk, because you can make the 80-20 pools and you can, to make sure that you hedge against the market a little bit while getting some fees. So yeah, Balancer earlier this year had a issue with I think it was their boosted pools technology, and had to take emergency measures from their own multi-sig. So yeah, like it's not just new things which are being built, but even the older protocols which have issues from time to time. So from a capital formation perspective, Jamal, so how can we expect someone to build a risk model that they're able to calculate all these risks? How can we expect someone who's going to navigate the ever-evolving ecosystem? It's just not possible. Like it's just going to be too difficult for anyone to in the future if we want to get mass adoption to figure these things out. The second point I do want to make, and I'll make this one a bit quickly. So the other big concern right now we have is regulatory uncertainty. So institutional investors. So essentially, the previous thing I spoke about was smart contract risk. That's valid to all, or like pretty much everyone uses on chain. This one's more a concern for institutional investors mainly because, and maybe people live in America and certain individuals who actually might be super concerned about this kind of thing. But institutional investors in particular are super concerned about the lack of regulatory clarity surrounding DeFi. Like it's still uncertain right now. We don't know what's happening. Like there's America's coming out with new rulings there every week. There's like a absence of intermediaries, which it makes it challenging for big funds to deploy directly on chain because and this is something we've spoken to a number of our partner funds as a risk wealth management team. We've spoken to a number of institutions who all say, I won't name names here, but they all say they're super keen to deploy on chain, but they just can't right now. Like they can't deploy because they don't know the counterparties involved. So like they would love to deploy to Aave or Compound with the USDC because because they have funds available, but the borrowing pool on say Aave or a Compound, they take on the risk of the entire pool. You don't know who you have no knowledge if someone who is sanctioned is in that pool borrowing funds against you, and then that automatically makes you involved in like a terrorist financing activity or money laundering. You don't know how OFAC's going to work. They might just they might make a decision on the fly and find you liable for borrowing these funds out. So yeah, it's essentially those two things. I think it's smart contract risk and regulatory uncertainty.
Let's talk about the regulatory uncertainty first. Because I see that as a persistent problem, right? There's this concept that people talk about on crypto Twitter called choke point 2.0. And that's where and they talk about attack vectors, where the attack vector is the SEC in the US, is Gary Gensler. People say that, and how do you see like the institutions are afraid of that attack vector, or are they taking, measures to try to mitigate that? Or like, what do you see coming down the pike because of that particular attack vector? And is choke point 2.0 a valid concern?
I think so. I think in America, especially where most of the funds in crypto do come from, and it's a market that we really need to kind of expand if we want to get adoption, worldwide adoption, because so many of the users, so many of the funds, so many of like the developers are in America. I think it's a big concern. I think there's a lot of money waiting in the wings to deploy on chain, especially from American firms and funds. There's most of them, I think, honestly, a lot of them are just waiting for clarity. I don't think there's anything they can do right now. There's Bitcoin ETFs potentially coming out in the next 12 months. I think that's definitely a positive thing for the market, but that still doesn't give them the opportunity to deploy on chain or get directly involved in DeFi if they wish to do so. And that's the opportunity that they're going to miss regardless. So even if the, XYZ tokens classified as a non-security, even if Bitcoin ETFs is approved, even if we got an ETH ETF, like where we want to get to is a lot of clarity about how on-chain activity is regulated by the SEC and all of the other financial institutions in America, and what each fund or needs to actually fulfill on-chain criteria to make sure they are being compliant. It's a long way to go, Jamal. I don't think we're anywhere close to where we need to be, but baby steps. It's been I think America's been going backwards until the recent XRP ruling, but hopefully we get some more clarity in the next couple of years. I'm not holding my breath, but always excited to see what happens.
Okay, great. So you mentioned the word sanctions, right? I want to ask you first, what's a provable identity framework, right? And how will you implement that framework, and why is that going to be a difference maker?
So in essence, the framework safeguards all users, not just institutions, but all users, including yourself and me and whoever else wants to transfer the blockchain, against illicit activities by requiring users to verify their identity to execute transactions. So before they need to get on chain, they will need to pass a verification process. There's going to be different levels of verification process, and I'll get to that in a second. But essentially, no transaction will be processed until a user is verified. And because only verified users can participate on chain activity, there's going to be benefits to that, because it's automatically going to prevent malicious actors from using the network, because we'll be monitoring all the data from the users, their previous accounts. We've got a very strong AML, compliant team. There's a lot of activity which we can automatically filter out. So there's going to be different levels of verification. So each developer team or each team which runs an app on our chain will be able to set what level their verification they want their users to pass before they want to use the app. Because I'll give you an example. Suppose there's an app which sells treasury bills, so T-bills on chain. Their verification requirements will be, the verification requirements of their users will be much higher than level of the other apps, because America needs a lot more American regulations, and American SEC needs a lot more verification, a lot more sort of information for users or people who buy T-bills than other countries or other kind of apps. There's going to be, we're constantly going to be monitoring the changes in users' data. So if any user suddenly faces regulatory restrictions, the only action they can do is withdraw their funds from chain. So yeah, this framework's going to be, but as I mentioned before, it's going to be very good for institutions because they will know who they transact against and they're not exposed to any counterparty risks that they don't want to take on. There's going to be heightened security because of this verification process, because it reduces risk of fraud, and it facilitates the return of secure funds if anything does happen on chain in event of fraud or anything sort of malicious. So yeah, it's a lot that we're building. We're gonna one of the most interesting features of this provable identity framework is regional permissioning. So, and this is something I'm super excited about myself. So when a user does pass the verification process on chain, they get an NFT in their wallet, which is we're calling it the proof of identity NFT, but that's not important right now. But what this NFT does, one of the traits captured in this NFT is a single line, which is a country code. So, and through just a single line of code, developers can restrict or enable users from a specific region to use their app. We see great value proposition here because it allows developers and anyone who wants to build an app to appropriately permission their apps in alignment with their own country's regulatory compliance requirements. So, a good example of this is we've had some developers reach out from Germany. They are keen to move from Cosmos to Haven 1 because German regulators actually require them to have a product with verified users. So using this proof of identity mechanism, they can make sure that only German-specific users can use their product. So, there's things like this. There's a huge number of possibilities that Haven 1 does bring to the table, which you can't actually do on Cosmos. You can't do on a public blockchain. And that's just something that we will be able to provide, which other blockchains aren't able to provide. And again, this is I want to make this very clear, Himal. This is why we're not a competitor to Ethereum. We're not a competitor to Cosmos because we provide something different. We're not going to compete with public blockchains because they, of course, provide something we can't provide, which is a Wild West and a completely decentralized free-for-all environment. What we provide is we'll be focusing on safety, security, and transparency.
Awesome. I have a few questions come out of that. So I'm wondering, I'm going to ask you the first. You said people get a proof of identity NFT, and that's not the most important thing right now. What if it is? What if, because you've seen some of the valuations of the NFT artwork, the Bored Ape Yacht Club and different ones go from like 3 million an ape to 30,000 an ape, and the people are saying the NFT market's dying. What if this is the time that you transition the NFT market to, identity, to what the real utility is going to be? What if it's the perfect time?
Yeah, so I mean, just to clarify, the identity NFT itself is non-transferable. So of course, if I verify, I'll get my own identity ID. I won't be able to trade that or give that to anyone else. So it'll be limited to myself. But in terms of trading NFTs on chain, there's a lot of things you can do with verification. Chain which requires verification. You can bring in tokenized assets. You can bring in real world NFT related assets. You can. If there's there's apps, actually, there's a few people who we're talking to in relation to using collectibles as as NFTs to borrow against on chain. So, for example, someone's got a Rolex they want to put on chain. If there's a certain place which can value their Rolex, have custody of it. You can have a system where, or even doesn't even have to have custody because the person is verified. You can have a legal contract. You don't even have to give custody of your Rolex or your any other expensive item you have. So you can even take loans against them, and that's not really possible unless you use a private blockchain, not private, a blockchain which requires identity verification. So there's going to be a greater use of different types of NFTs on chain. It's a lot of cool things you can do. To be honest with you, this is stuff we're still exploring and building out. Our main focus right now is getting into testnet. So currently we're in the private testnet. We'll get the public test in about a month's time. We're building a lot of the key infrastructure and apps. So something which other chains aren't doing is we're building the native AMM. We're building the native lending market. We're building the native derivatives protocol. So pretty much having Uniswap, Aave, and GMX all like owned by the chain itself, which hasn't really, no other chain really does that. So it's just having the core pillars of DeFi infrastructure all owned by the network, all going to token holders itself. And this is something a lot of information we'll release in the next 6 months slowly. And this kind of stuff prevents liquidity fragmentation, and it provides a lot of value for the Haven 1 token in terms of revenue, governance right for these protocols, and it's just not just a simple gas token.
I like what you're doing. I like it so far. From what I know so far, I was early investor in Aave.
Oh, great.
But I had that on. I put on Celsius, so I lost. And then we're going to talk about fraud and malicious actors. And the first thing I want to talk about though is the hacks. Right, there have been some massive DeFi hacks and exploits in recent weeks, including Multi-Chain's $125 million exploit. And you talked about layer 2s earlier. There was a second attack on the Poly network, right? How would Haven would have prevented and helped, with safeguards and frameworks, had that your frameworks been in place from the beginning? How would those hacks not have happened? And what do you envision for the industry in wake of these developments, especially from like a ecosystem security perspective?
So the multi-chain situation is pretty awful. My heart goes out to all those people affected. I know a few of the people who've lost funds there. So I'm hoping that at least some of the funds that Circle has frozen can be returned. I think, the multi-chain situation. Now, all of the MPC nodes that were run by the CEO, that were run by the CEO's like personal cloud server account, which is, now it's no longer accessible because apparently the CEO has been arrested and the operational access of the keys has been revoked. And, this off-chain security is unforgivable. There should be no protocol or bridge or whatever it is like that should be run this way. And remember, multi-chain went through 8 audits, but none of these audits covered the best security practices behind the contract code itself. In terms of Poly network, I think, this was like a bit of a simpler case of compromised keys. I don't know how much of this is true. Like this is what was reported. Like there could be some bad actors involved here. It seems like 3 of the 4 multi-sig signers, validated the deposit proofs. So that just gave the hacker grant, access to funds. So both situations involved some sort of loss of keys or like misappropriation of the MPC nodes. It's a whole, this is a bizarre situation, which I'm amazed is still happening in this part of in DeFi right now, given that we are a few years in, but that's just a sad reality we're in. So first of all, we're going to protect users from the risks of cross-chain bridges. Yield App is going to be the sole access point to Haven 1 to begin with. We're going to use Fireblocks as our custody provider, which has enterprise-grade vault security. So and proper transactional governance. So it's really hard for us to use Fireblocks and then lose our keys. And they're a great, very solid, great company. A lot of big firms use Fireblocks. So it's very difficult for us to lose our keys and let attackers access our funds if we use Fireblocks and all of the layers of protection that they do offer. So that's not going to be possible. What if it happened? Because what if it happened in Poly network and with the multi-chain, not going to be possible with the Haven 1 bridge. We're also going to ensure like each asset which is deposited on chain has one-to-one verifiable asset backing. It provides users with like an instant access to the holdings all the time. We're going to use the Chainlink's proof of reserve system to do so. So everyone will be able to see exactly how many assets are on Haven 1. We're gonna make everything super transparent. It's the situation with the multi-chain and Poly network. Them losing their keys is kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. Like it's a lot of money. I find it hard to believe there aren't bad actors involved internally, but that's just my thoughts. It's kind of difficult to sort of comprehend on how this has all happened in so-called trusted protocols itself?
I got to talk about that because two of the biggest, I mean, actually, you can even say three of the biggest, busts from 2022, and I mentioned Celsius, and then FTX, and maybe 3AC. These were CEOs, people had no criminal background. Like they were entrepreneurs, they were successful people. They had no malicious background. Like so they probably would have passed any KYC, right?
Yeah.
And still you had the fraud and maliciousness, right? That occurred. Why do you think that is? or and how can Haven One ensure your own compliance as well for users to ensure, like, is it greed, or is it just like something that happens, or is just making the ecosystem so big and you don't have the proper risk management? Like what, how could you turn a great citizen into a criminal,
Oh,
and
it is super bizarre. I think maybe just, Mashinsky was, committing clear fraud. He was trading and asking people to deposit funds in Celsius when they were clearly insolvent, which is goes against his own duties as a director and CEO of the company. So that's, I think he was in a very dire situation, probably not thinking straight. I can't comment to a state of mind, but I think it just seemed very desperate as to what he was doing, trying to trade their own way out of trouble. So in terms of what Celsius had left over. Look, again, it's I think people lose themselves in crypto. Like you said, Jamal, it's a lot of greed, perhaps, for a lot of arrogance, a lot of ego. These people, like a lot of the founders, go through. We talk about it internally a little bit, a bit of tongue in cheek, but you never want to be the main figure in crypto. You never want to be the guy who's like the limelight, because you always get taken down. Like Do Kwon was the main figure for a long time. He brought a lot of attention to himself, gets taken out. Same with Mashinsky, same with Avi, the guy who did I think it was the Mango Markets hack. He was talking a lot about like how he flash loaned, and he was kind of bragging about it a lot. He became the main figure in crypto for a while. So anyone who's got the the central figure syndrome and the main figure syndrome always gets taken down. So it's always good to keep a lower profile than most people. There's some good actors in the space, like such as Sam K from the Frax, and of course people like Kobe. They don't really put themselves in the limelight as much. As much as Do Kwons or the Mashinskys and whatnot. So yeah, it's just I think things aren't going to change anytime soon, because I'm sure the next run's going to bring very similar people over as well. But yeah, we can hope for the best though. So in terms of,
how do you even ensure your own compliance?
Yeah, so just a little bit of background. We've been running Yield Out, which is a regulated, compliant digital wealth management platform for a number of years. Internally, we have a strong compliance team. We're all on top of all new legislation, such as MiCA, DORA, and anything else comes up. We constantly monitor all activity with on our user base, and for anti-money laundering, CTF stuff, compliance, everything else. So we're going to bring all of that to Haven One. We've registered the Haven One Foundation under the Swiss jurisdiction, and we're working with a number of entities in Switzerland to create a home for our Haven One DAO. So as you're aware, Switzerland has a very strong reputation for regulation, and it has a very flexible legal frameworks for blockchain projects now. So the Swiss city of Zug has developed into a world center of blockchain industry, with like a huge number of institutions and crypto services based in the region, and it provides us with like a lot of opportunities to cooperate with them. To be frank, we could have chosen, we could have chosen a less stringent jurisdiction, such as Cayman Islands or Bahamas or whatever, and it essentially achieves the same outcomes for the foundation base for lesser costs and less regulatory oversight. But we made a very intentional decision to align ourselves with a reputable jurisdiction with a strong legal system, because we want to make sure that all of our users and all of our all the participants, all of our investors are kind of satisfied with our transparency. We want them to have confidence in what we're building and confidence in the team itself. So we've made a very intentional decision to register in Switzerland rather than one of the lesser legal jurisdictions. If you could say that.
I could say that. I mean, I could open a crypto fund right now in Cayman. Not that I'm a bad actor or anything,
Yeah.
but I understand what you're saying. That sounds so. One last question. Well, actually, two. You said you're not competing with ETH or Cosmos, right? And then you've also said that you're an ETH maxi, right? So you're building a platform that is not blockchain, as kind of blockchain agnostic. Yet you're an ETH maximalist, right? How's that conflict working for you?
So this is something we've discussed internally a lot in terms of, should we build on top of Ethereum or should we build our own layer one? We intentionally chose to build the layer one because the layer two technologies isn't there yet. Perhaps in the future we can revisit that, but right now, Go Quorum layer one tech allows us to make the permission network that we need. Now, we're going to still collaborate a lot with Ethereum and other chains. Like, we're going to have the wrapped assets on our chain. We're going to have products that, that sell to institutional investors that they can't do so on their chain itself. So, for example, if we want to create a product which, puts all the layer one tokens into a kind of like a pool, essentially what old Balancer used to be. And, we can sell that as to institutions, which can't really be done because on other chains right now. We're gonna have an ETH staking LSD product on Haven 1, so that's something we're going to offer to institutions as well as regular users. So for institutions may not be able to buy STEs, Lido's STEs, or Rocket Pool's ETH, they can buy regulated and compliant H1 ETH and get the same kind of staking returns from Haven 1 as well. So we're not looking to compete at all with Ethereum or the other chains. This is a very collaborative kind of environment that we're building. There's going to be benefits to ETH. There's going to be benefits to other blockchains from collaborations, and that's something we're definitely going to explore for the next 12 months.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, sounds wonderful. So I want to thank you very much for your time today. This has been a wonderful conversation. I learned a lot, and I'm going to be watching for your token launches. And speaking of token launch, when is how can people find out more information about you, about Haven 1, about when your token launch is, about what you guys are up to, your roadmap, including any of that? How can they find out more? So
if anyone wants to find us and learn more about us, you can find us at Twitter, which is at Haven 1 official. That's the Twitter username. Or directly on our website, which is haven1.org. Look, currently, as I mentioned before, we'll be running an incentivized testnet campaign starting about in a month's time, approximately. We're going to have a lot of opportunities in terms of for developers. We're going to have our own hackathon at the end of the year. We're going to have a lot of collaborative opportunities with other chains and other developers of other chains to try and get them to test our technology out. We're going to have a functioning grant system in the next 6 months as well. In terms of token launch, we're looking at first half of 2024. At the same, of course, has to be when mainnet launches as well. So a lot of building to do, a lot of work to be done before that happens. And yeah, I think we're looking forward to working in the rest of the bear market. Great time to build. Great time to build those networks, and great time to just get the base right before the next run comes.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Jamal.